Question 1. Research into IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7. One implementation has revealed a client request to permanently delete specific historical data that is no longer actively used. However, the organization operates under a regulatory framework that mandates a minimum retention period for all client data for audit and legal discovery purposes. The IT administrator is tasked with responding to this request. Which of the following actions best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory compliance? Option A. Inform the client that their request cannot be fulfilled due to the organization's strict data retention policies and offer no further alternatives. Option B. Attempt to manually overwrite or encrypt the data within the TSM v7, one storage pool to obscure it from view without consulting legal or compliance. Option C. Initiate a review with the client's legal and compliance departments to determine the exact data retention requirements applicable to the requested data, and then proceed with deletion only if explicitly permitted by those authorities and the TSM v7, one system's capabilities for compliant data disposition. Option D. Immediately proceed with the data deletion using TSM v7, one commands to satisfy the client's request, assuming that no longer actively used implies it can be purged. Correct answer is C. Initiate a review with the client's legal and compliance departments to determine the exact data retention requirements applicable to the requested data, and then proceed with deletion only if explicitly permitted by those authorities and the TSM v7, one system's capabilities for compliant data disposition. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's immediate desire for data deletion and the regulatory requirements for data retention and auditability, particularly within the context of IBM Tivoli Storage Manager, TSM, v7, one implementation. The core of the challenge lies in balancing client satisfaction with legal and ethical obligations. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing demands without compromising data integrity, security, or compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to established regulatory frameworks and internal policies. By consulting with legal counsel and the client's compliance officer, the IT professional ensures that any data deletion request is evaluated against relevant data retention mandates. This proactive engagement prevents potential violations of data protection laws and industry-specific regulations that might require data to be preserved for a defined period for audit, legal, or business continuity purposes. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible data management and a thorough understanding of the TSM v7, one environment's capabilities and limitations in handling such requests in a compliant manner. An incorrect approach that involves immediately deleting the data without proper authorization or assessment would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action could lead to noncompliance with data retention laws, potentially resulting in fines, legal repercussions, and reputational damage for both the organization and the individual. It bypasses established governance procedures and disregards the importance of audit trails, which are critical for demonstrating compliance and accountability. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the client's request entirely, is also professionally unacceptable. While it might seem to protect against accidental noncompliance, it fails to address the client's needs and can lead to dissatisfaction and a breakdown in the professional relationship. It also misses an opportunity to educate the client on the importance of data retention policies and the proper procedures for managing data lifecycle within the TSM v7, one system. A third incorrect approach, which is to attempt a technical workaround to delete the data without understanding the full implications, is risky and could lead to data corruption or incomplete deletion, leaving the organization vulnerable to compliance issues. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and an over-reliance on technical solutions without considering the broader governance and regulatory context. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the request. Clearly identify the client's request and the specific data involved. 2. Identify relevant policies and regulations. Determine which internal policies and external regulations apply to the data in question. This includes data retention schedules, privacy laws, and industry-specific compliance requirements. 3. Consult stakeholders. Engage with relevant parties, including legal counsel, compliance officers, and the client, to understand their perspectives and requirements. 4. Assess technical feasibility and impact. Evaluate how the request can be technically fulfilled within the TSM v7.1 environment, considering the impact on data integrity, security, and auditability. 5. Document the decision. Record the request, the assessment process, the decision made, and the rationale behind it. 6. Communicate and implement. Clearly communicate the decision and the next steps to all stakeholders and implement the approved course of action. Question 2. Market research demonstrates that understanding customer data retention patterns within IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7.1 environments could significantly improve service offerings. A marketing team proposes to directly access and analyze the metadata of customer backup files, including file names and timestamps, to identify trends in data volume and age. This access will be performed by a marketing analyst who has been granted limited read-only access to the TSM server's database, but not to the actual backup content. The TSM administrator is aware of this request and is concerned about the potential implications. Option A. The TSM administrator should facilitate the marketing analyst's access to the TSM database metadata, ensuring that the access is strictly read-only and limited to file names and timestamps, and that the marketing team signs a non-disclosure agreement regarding any findings. Option B. The TSM administrator should grant the marketing analyst access to the TSM database metadata and also provide access to a sample of actual backup file content to enrich the market research, as long as the analyst agrees to keep the content confidential. Option C. The TSM administrator should refuse the request outright, citing potential security risks and the lack of explicit customer consent for such data analysis, and suggest alternative, less intrusive market research methods. Option D. The TSM administrator should proceed with providing the marketing analyst access to the TSM database metadata, assuming that since the actual backup content is not being accessed, there are no significant privacy concerns. The correct answer is A. The TSM administrator should facilitate the marketing analyst's access to the TSM database metadata, ensuring that the access is strictly read-only and limited to file names and timestamps, and that the marketing team signs a non-disclosure agreement regarding any findings. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing business objectives with data privacy and security obligations, particularly concerning sensitive customer information managed by IBM Tivoli Storage Manager, TSM. The core of the dilemma lies in the potential for unauthorized access or disclosure of this data, which could have significant legal, financial, and reputational consequences. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any data access for market research purposes is conducted ethically and in compliance with relevant regulations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes data security and compliance by obtaining explicit consent from customers for the use of their anonymized data in market research, and by ensuring that the data is aggregated and anonymized to prevent re-identification. The organization upholds its commitment to data privacy. This aligns with the principles of responsible data handling and demonstrates a proactive stance on protecting customer information, which is crucial for maintaining trust and adhering to data protection regulations. An incorrect approach that involves directly accessing and analyzing individual customer backup data without consent or proper anonymization would constitute a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This would violate principles of data privacy and potentially breach regulations governing the handling of personal information. Such an action could lead to severe penalties, including fines, legal action, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on internal policies without verifying their alignment with current data protection laws, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to ensure that the organization's practices are legally sound and ethically responsible. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the ethical and regulatory implications of any proposed action. This involves understanding the nature of the data being handled, the potential risks associated with its use, and the applicable legal and contractual obligations. Seeking legal counsel and consulting with data privacy officers are essential steps to ensure that all actions are compliant. Furthermore, a commitment to transparency with customers regarding data usage, coupled with robust anonymization and security measures, forms the bedrock of responsible data management. Question 3. Operational review demonstrates that a critical business application is unavailable due to data corruption, and the business unit urgently requires a full data restoration from the IBM Tivoli Storage Manager V7. 1. Backup. The standard restoration procedure involves a multi-step verification process that will take several hours to complete, potentially delaying the application's availability beyond the acceptable downtime window. The IT administrator has the capability to perform a faster, less verified restoration that would bring the application back online within the required time frame. Which of the following actions best represents professional and compliant practice in this situation? Option A. Refuse to perform the expedited restoration and insist on the standard time-consuming procedure, explaining that compliance cannot be compromised. Option B. Perform the expedited restoration and then retroactively document the process and seek approval, assuming that the successful outcome will justify the shortcut. Option C. Document the proposed expedited restoration process, including the risks and the rationale for the deviation from standard procedures, and seek formal approval from management before proceeding. Option D. Immediately perform the expedited restoration to meet the business's urgent deadline, as the priority is to restore business operations. The correct answer is C. Document the proposed expedited restoration process, including the risks and the rationale for the deviation from standard procedures, and seek formal approval from management before proceeding. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between immediate operational needs and long-term data integrity and compliance requirements, specifically within the context of IBM Tivoli Storage Manager, TSM, V7. 1. Implementation. The pressure to restore critical data quickly can lead to shortcuts that bypass established procedures, potentially compromising the audit trail and security of the data. Careful judgment is required to balance the urgency of the business request with the imperative to adhere to the established regulatory framework governing data management and storage. The correct approach, which involves documenting the deviation and seeking formal approval, represents best professional practice because it upholds the principles of accountability and transparency. By formally acknowledging the deviation from standard operating procedures and obtaining explicit authorization, the IT professional ensures that the decision is not made in isolation and that its implications are understood by relevant stakeholders. This aligns with the general principles of IT governance and auditability, which are implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks requiring documented processes and change management. While specific regulations for C 2010-511 are not provided, the underlying intent of such certifications is to ensure robust, auditable, and secure IT operations. This approach maintains the integrity of the TSM environment and the audit logs, which are crucial for compliance and troubleshooting. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the restoration without documentation or approval represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This bypasses the change management process, which is a cornerstone of IT governance and is often mandated by regulatory bodies to ensure that changes to critical systems are controlled, reviewed, and authorized. Such an action creates an undocumented exception, making it impossible to accurately audit the system's history, troubleshoot future issues related to the restoration, or demonstrate compliance with data management policies. It also introduces a security risk, as unauthorized or undocumented changes can weaken the overall security posture. Another incorrect approach, which is to refuse the request outright without offering an alternative or explanation, is professionally unhelpful and can damage stakeholder relationships. While it avoids the immediate risk of non-compliance, it fails to address the business need and demonstrates a lack of problem-solving initiative. This can lead to frustration and a perception of IT as an impediment rather than a partner. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the business imperative. Clearly ascertain the criticality and urgency of the data restoration request. 2. Assess the deviation. Identify precisely how the requested action deviates from standard operating procedures and the potential risks associated with this deviation. 3. Consult policies and procedures. Refer to established documentation for TSM V7. 1. Implementation, change management, and data recovery. 4. Propose solutions. Explore options that balance the business need with compliance and security requirements. This might include a documented, approved deviation or an alternative recovery method. 5. Seek formal approval. If a deviation is necessary, document the request, the rationale, the risks, and the proposed mitigation, and obtain explicit approval from the appropriate authority, e.g., IT Management Compliance Officer. 6. Document everything. Maintain a comprehensive record of the request, the decision-making process, the approval, and the execution of the action. Question 4. Which approach would be most appropriate for an IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7? One administrator when a client urgently requests direct access to a specific file from a backup, claiming a critical business need, but the standard recovery process involves a multi-step verification and restoration procedure that the client deems too time-consuming. Option A. Grant the client direct access to the backup media or storage location to locate and retrieve the file themselves, as they have urgent business needs. Option B. Adhere strictly to the documented TSM v7, One Data Recovery Procedures, explaining the necessity of each step for data integrity and security, and provide an estimated timeline for completion. Option C. Create a separate, ad hoc copy of the requested file from the backup and provide it to the client without formally restoring it through the TSM interface. Option D. Manually extract the file from the backup data using low-level tools outside of the TSM v7, One interface to expedite the process. The correct answer is B. Adhere strictly to the documented TSM v7, One Data Recovery Procedures, explaining the necessity of each step for data integrity and security, and provide an estimated timeline for completion. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between a client's immediate desire for data access and the IT administrator's responsibility to maintain data integrity and security, which are paramount in IBM Tivoli Storage Manager, TSM, v7, One implementation. The administrator must balance client service with adherence to established protocols and best practices for data management. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to established data recovery procedures and the principle of least privilege. This aligns with the regulatory framework for data management, which emphasizes controlled access and auditable processes to prevent unauthorized data modification or deletion. By following the documented procedure, the administrator ensures that the data recovery is performed in a secure and traceable manner, minimizing the risk of data corruption or security breaches. This upholds professional integrity and client trust by demonstrating a commitment to robust data governance. An incorrect approach that bypasses standard recovery procedures to grant immediate access, even with client consent, poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. It undermines the integrity of the TSM system and its audit trails, potentially violating data protection regulations that mandate secure and controlled access. This action could lead to data loss, unauthorized disclosure, or compliance violations, exposing both the administrator and the organization to legal and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, involving the direct manipulation of backup data outside of the TSM interface, is highly problematic. This action bypasses all built-in TSM safeguards, including versioning and integrity checks, making it impossible to verify the accuracy or completeness of the recovered data. It also creates an unrecoverable state if errors occur, violating the fundamental principles of data backup and recovery, and potentially leading to severe data loss and regulatory noncompliance. Finally, an approach that involves creating a new, separate backup of the requested data without proper validation or integration into the existing TSM environment is also flawed. While seemingly an attempt to provide access, it creates data silos and can lead to inconsistencies. Without proper management within the TSM framework, this new backup may not be subject to the same retention policies, security controls, or deduplication benefits, leading to inefficient storage and potential compliance issues. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the client's request and its underlying need. This should be followed by an assessment of the request against established organizational policies, procedures, and the capabilities of the TSM v7, One system. When a conflict arises, the priority should be to adhere to documented, secure, and auditable processes. If existing procedures are insufficient, the professional should escalate the issue to seek guidance or propose necessary updates to the procedures, rather than deviating from them without authorization. Question 5. The review process indicates that during a critical system outage requiring immediate troubleshooting of IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7, 1, A system administrator considered accessing sensitive customer data directly from backup archives to identify the root cause, bypassing the standard anonymization procedures. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Proceed with accessing the sensitive customer data directly, as the urgency of the outage justifies the temporary circumvention of standard procedures to restore service quickly. Option B. Attempt to troubleshoot the issue using only system logs and metadata, even if it significantly prolongs the outage and makes root cause analysis more difficult. Option C. Immediately escalate the situation to management, highlighting the need for urgent troubleshooting and requesting guidance on accessing necessary data in compliance with data protection policies, or to authorize a secure, audited access if absolutely necessary. Option D. Access the sensitive customer data directly but ensure that no copies are made and that the access is as brief as possible, assuming this minimal exposure is acceptable given the emergency. The correct answer is A. Proceed with accessing the sensitive customer data directly, as the urgency of the outage justifies the temporary circumvention of standard procedures to restore service quickly. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to data privacy and compliance within the context of IBM Tivoli Storage Manager, TSM, v7. 1 implementation. The core dilemma lies in balancing the need for efficient data recovery and system troubleshooting with the imperative to protect sensitive customer information, as mandated by regulatory frameworks governing data handling. The pressure to resolve an urgent issue quickly can tempt individuals to bypass established security protocols, creating a significant risk of data breaches and non-compliance. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to established data access and handling policies, even under pressure. This means utilizing anonymized or masked data for troubleshooting whenever possible, and if direct access to sensitive data is unavoidable, ensuring that such access is logged, authorized, and conducted in a secure, controlled environment with minimal exposure. This aligns with best professional practices that prioritize data security and regulatory compliance, such as those outlined in general data protection principles that would be applicable in a regulated environment. Such practices prevent unauthorized access, maintain data integrity, and ensure auditability, thereby safeguarding both the organization and its customers from legal and reputational damage. An incorrect approach of directly accessing and reviewing sensitive customer data without proper authorization or anonymization would constitute a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This bypasses established security controls designed to protect personally identifiable information, PI, or other sensitive data, violating principles of data minimization and purpose limitation. It exposes the organization to potential fines and legal action for noncompliance with data protection laws. Another incorrect approach, that of delaying the resolution of the critical issue due to an inability to access necessary data, while seemingly cautious, can also be problematic. While prioritizing security is crucial, an organization should have predefined, secure procedures for emergency data access. Failing to have such procedures in place, or failing to follow them when necessary, can lead to operational disruption and potentially impact customer service, which may also have indirect compliance implications if service-level agreements are breached due to preventable system downtime. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's data governance policies and relevant regulatory requirements. When faced with an urgent need to access sensitive data, the professional should first assess if anonymized or masked data can suffice. If not, they must follow the documented procedure for requesting and obtaining authorized access to sensitive data, ensuring all steps for secure handling and logging are meticulously followed. If such procedures are lacking or inadequate, the professional has an ethical obligation to escalate this deficiency to management for remediation, rather than resorting to unauthorized or insecure methods. Question 6. The analysis reveals that the IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7 1 environment is experiencing performance degradation during peak backup windows, leading to extended job completion times and potential SLA breaches. The IT team is considering several strategies to optimize the system's process efficiency. Which of the following approaches best balances performance improvement with the need for data integrity and operational stability? Option A. Immediately increase the deduplication ratio aggressively across all storage pools to maximize storage efficiency, assuming this will alleviate backup window pressure. Option B. Directly modify critical TSM database and configuration files in the production environment to accelerate data processing, bypassing the standard change management procedures. Option C. Implement a phased approach to optimization, starting with detailed performance monitoring to identify specific bottlenecks, followed by targeted adjustments to TSM server parameters and client configurations, with rigorous testing and rollback plans in place before and after each change. Option D. Disable non-essential monitoring agents and alerts within TSM to reduce system overhead and free up resources for backup processes. The correct answer is C. Implement a phased approach to optimization, starting with detailed performance monitoring to identify specific bottlenecks, followed by targeted adjustments to TSM server parameters and client configurations, with rigorous testing and rollback plans in place before and after each change. Explanation: the scenario presents a common challenge in IT infrastructure management. Optimizing a critical system like IBM Tivoli Storage Manager, TSM, V7, one for improved performance and resource utilization without compromising data integrity or availability. A professional challenge lies in balancing the desire for efficiency with the stringent requirements for data protection, backup, and recovery, all within the context of the exam-specified regulatory framework, which, for C 2010-511, implies adherence to general IT best practices and potentially industry-specific regulations related to data retention and security. Though no specific jurisdiction is provided, we will assume general IT governance principles. Careful judgment is required to select an optimization strategy that is both effective and compliant. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, data-driven, and phased implementation of changes. This aligns with IT governance principles that emphasize risk management, change control, and validation. By first identifying specific performance bottlenecks through monitoring, and then implementing targeted optimizations with thorough testing and rollback plans, professionals ensure that changes are controlled, their impact is understood, and potential disruptions are minimized. This methodical approach is crucial for maintaining the integrity and availability of the storage management system, which is vital for business continuity and compliance with data retention policies. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on aggressive deduplication settings without prior analysis fails to consider the potential impact on performance and recovery times. This could lead to increased CPU or I/O load, negating the intended benefits and potentially hindering backup or restore operations, which could have regulatory implications if data recovery SLAs are breached. Another incorrect approach that involves disabling certain monitoring features to reduce overhead overlooks the critical need for visibility into system health and performance. This lack of insight makes it impossible to identify future issues or to prove compliance with any data protection or audit requirements. Finally, an approach that bypasses the change control process and implements significant configuration changes directly in production without testing or approval introduces unacceptable risk. This violates fundamental IT security and operational best practices and could lead to system instability or data loss, with severe compliance and business consequences. Professional decision-making in such situations should involve a structured process. 1. Understand the current state and identify specific pain points through comprehensive monitoring and analysis. 2. Define clear objectives for optimization, ensuring they align with business and regulatory requirements. 3. Evaluate potential solutions, considering their impact on performance, security, and recovery capabilities. 4. Develop a detailed implementation plan, including testing, rollback procedures, and change control approvals. 5. Implement changes in a phased manner, with continuous monitoring and validation. 6. Document all changes and their outcomes for auditing and future reference. Question 7. The audit findings indicate that while backup and restore operations are completing within acceptable timeframes, there are recurring periods of high resource utilization on the TSM server and extended client connection times during peak backup windows. This suggests potential inefficiencies in the current TSM v7, one configuration and operational processes that could impact future scalability and performance. Which of the following approaches best addresses these findings to optimize process efficiency? Option A. Manually adjust TSM server parameters at random to see if any changes improve resource utilization metrics. Option B. Systematically analyze TSM v7. One performance reports and logs to identify specific bottlenecks in data transfer, client communication, or storage pool operation, and then implement targeted configuration adjustments or process refinements. Option C. Implement a blanket policy to reduce the backup frequency for all client systems to alleviate server load during peak periods. Option D. Immediately upgrade the TSM server hardware with faster processors and additional memory to accommodate the observed high resource utilization. The correct answer is B. Systematically analyze TSM v7. One performance reports and logs to identify specific bottlenecks in data transfer, client communication, or storage pool operations, and then implement targeted configuration adjustments or process refinements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations where performance metrics, while seemingly adequate, mask underlying inefficiencies that could lead to increased operational costs and potential service degradation under peak loads. The challenge lies in identifying and addressing these inefficiencies proactively rather than reactively, which requires a nuanced understanding of TSM v7, one's capabilities and best practices for process optimization. The audit findings, while not indicating outright failure, suggest a deviation from optimal performance, necessitating a strategic approach to improvement. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach focuses on leveraging TSM v7, one's built-in reporting and monitoring tools to identify specific bottlenecks within the backup and restore processes. This involves analyzing data such as backup completion times, data transfer rates, client connection times, and resource utilization, CPU memory disk I/O, on both the TSM server and client machines. By pinpointing the exact areas of inefficiency, such as slow client-side data deduplication, network latency, or suboptimal storage pool configurations, targeted adjustments can be made. This aligns with the principle of continuous improvement and proactive system management, ensuring that the TSM environment remains efficient, cost-effective, and resilient. This approach is best professional practice as it is data-driven, minimizes disruption, and directly addresses the root causes of potential performance issues, thereby ensuring compliance with service-level agreements and maintaining data integrity and availability. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves making broad, sweeping changes to TSM server parameters without a clear understanding of the impact. This is professionally unacceptable because it lacks a data-driven basis, increases the risk of unintended consequences, and can lead to further performance degradation or system instability. Bypasses the critical step of diagnosis and moves directly to remediation, which is inefficient and potentially harmful. Another incorrect approach is to simply increase hardware resources, e.g., faster disks, more RAM, without first optimizing the existing software configuration and processes. While hardware upgrades can sometimes alleviate performance issues, they are often a costly and less effective solution if the underlying software processes are inefficient. This approach fails to address the root cause and represents a misallocation of resources, which can be seen as a failure in professional judgment and fiscal responsibility. A third incorrect approach is to ignore the audit findings, assuming that current performance is acceptable. This is professionally unacceptable, as it demonstrates a lack of commitment to system health and continuous improvement. It risks future performance degradation, increased operational costs due to prolonged backup windows or inefficient storage utilization, and potential non-compliance with evolving business requirements or service-level agreements. It also fails to uphold the professional responsibility to maintain systems at their optimal operational capacity. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first thoroughly understanding the audit findings and their implications. This involves gathering all relevant performance data from TSM v7. 1. Analyzing it to identify specific areas of concern, and then formulating a hypothesis about the root causes. Based on this analysis, a targeted remediation plan should be developed, prioritizing changes that are least disruptive and most likely to yield significant improvements. Continuous monitoring after implementing changes is crucial to validate their effectiveness and make further adjustments as needed. This systematic, data-driven, and iterative approach ensures that optimizations are effective, efficient, and aligned with business objectives. Question 8. Compliance review shows that the Tivoli Storage Manager V7 one environment is experiencing performance degradation during daily backup operations, impacting the overall efficiency of the data protection process. The administrator is considering implementing a new data deduplication strategy to reduce storage footprint and improve backup speeds. However, the organization is subject to strict data retention regulations that mandate specific periods for data archival and immutability. Which of the following approaches best balances operational efficiency with regulatory compliance when implementing the new deduplication strategy? Option A. Conduct a thorough impact analysis of the proposed deduplication strategy on data retrieval capabilities and retention enforcement. This includes testing with representative data sets to confirm that all regulatory retention periods can still be met and that data remains accessible for audit purposes, followed by a phased rollout. Option B. Immediately implement the new deduplication strategy across all backup policies, prioritizing the performance gains and assuming the retention requirements will be met by default TSM configurations. Option C. Disable certain retention enforcement features within TSM v7, one to accommodate the faster deduplication process, with the intention of manually reviewing compliance logs periodically. Option D. Focus solely on optimizing the deduplication ratio to achieve the maximum storage savings, and address any potential compliance issues that arise after the implementation is complete. The correct answer is B. Immediately implement the new deduplication strategy across all backup policies, prioritizing the performance gains and assuming the retention requirements will be met by default TSM configurations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between optimizing storage operations for efficiency and ensuring adherence to data retention policies, which are often dictated by regulatory requirements. The need to balance performance gains with compliance mandates requires careful judgment and a thorough understanding of both Tivoli Storage Manager, TSM, v7, capabilities and the relevant regulatory framework for data management. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and documented process for evaluating and implementing changes. This involves understanding the impact of any optimization on data integrity, accessibility, and crucially, compliance with retention schedules. By engaging stakeholders and conducting thorough testing, the administrator ensures that operational improvements do not inadvertently lead to regulatory violations or data loss. This proactive and compliant methodology aligns with the principles of responsible data stewardship and risk management, which are implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory bodies overseeing data handling. An incorrect approach that bypasses proper testing and stakeholder consultation risks introducing unforeseen issues. This could lead to data corruption, loss of critical audit trails, or non-compliance with retention periods, potentially resulting in significant fines, reputational damage, and legal repercussions. Instance, altering backup schedules without considering their impact on recovery point objectives, RPO, or retention policies could violate regulations requiring data to be available for a specific duration or to be irretrievable after a certain period. Another incorrect approach might involve implementing optimizations based solely on performance metrics without a comprehensive understanding of the underlying data and its regulatory context. This could lead to optimizations that, while improving speed, compromise data security or accessibility for compliance purposes. For example, deduplication strategies that are too aggressive might impact the ability to retrieve specific historical versions of data required for legal discovery, thus failing to meet regulatory obligations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. This includes identifying potential impacts of any proposed change on data integrity, security, accessibility, and compliance. It requires consulting relevant regulatory guidelines and internal policies, engaging with legal and compliance teams, and performing rigorous testing in a non-production environment before implementing any changes in a live production environment. Documenting all steps, decisions, and outcomes is also paramount for auditability and accountability. Question 9. During the evaluation of a Tivoli Storage Manager V7, one environment experiencing significant performance degradation, which of the following diagnostic approaches would best address the issue while adhering to best practices for data integrity and operational efficiency? Option A. Immediately increase the capacity of all storage pools to accommodate potentially larger data volumes. Option B. Focus solely on optimizing network bandwidth between clients and the TSM server without investigating server-side processes. Option C. Temporarily disable deduplication and compression features to observe any immediate performance improvements. Option D. Analyze TSM server logs, client activity patterns, and storage subsystem performance metrics to identify specific bottlenecks. The correct answer is D. Analyze TSM server logs, client activity patterns, and storage subsystem performance metrics to identify specific bottlenecks. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing performance optimization with the need for robust data protection and compliance. The professional challenge lies in identifying the root cause of performance degradation within the Tivoli Storage Manager (TSM) environment without compromising the integrity or accessibility of backed-up data, which is critical for business continuity and regulatory adherence. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between superficial fixes and systemic issues that could have long-term implications. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically investigates the underlying causes of performance bottlenecks within the TSM V7. 1. Implementation. By analyzing TSM server logs, client activity, and storage subsystem performance, it allows for targeted remediation. This aligns with the principle of ensuring data integrity and availability, which are fundamental to data protection regulations and best practices. Proactive monitoring and analysis prevent potential data loss or extended downtime, thereby safeguarding the organization's assets and reputation. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on increasing storage capacity without diagnosing the performance issue is professionally unacceptable. This is because it fails to address the root cause and can lead to unnecessary expenditure, masking the real problem. From a regulatory perspective, if the performance issue leads to delays in backup completion or restoration, it could violate service-level agreements, SLAs, or data retention policies mandated by industry regulations, potentially leading to non-compliance. Another incorrect approach that involves disabling critical TSM functions, such as deduplication or compression, to improve performance is also professionally unsound. It might offer a temporary speed increase, it significantly compromises storage efficiency and can increase backup windows, potentially impacting recovery point objectives. RPO. Ethically and regulatorily, this could lead to a failure to meet data protection requirements, as the organization might not be able to store all necessary data within defined constraints or meet recovery time objectives. RTO. Due to larger backup sizes, the professional reasoning process should involve a structured troubleshooting methodology. This begins with clearly defining the observed problem, performance degradation. Next, gather relevant data from TSM logs, system performance metrics, and client reports. Formulate hypotheses about potential causes, prioritizing those that are most likely and have the greatest impact. Test these hypotheses systematically, starting with the least intrusive and most probable causes. Document all findings and actions taken. Finally, validate the solution and implement ongoing monitoring to prevent recurrence. This methodical approach ensures that solutions are effective, efficient, and compliant with all relevant operational and regulatory requirements. Question 10. The control framework reveals a need to optimize the process of archiving and retrieving data within IBM Tivoli Storage Manager V7. 1. Considering varying access frequencies and long-term retention requirements. Which of the following strategies best aligns with process optimization for tiered storage management in this context? Option A. Manually move data between different storage devices on an as-needed basis to reduce the complexity of automated tiering. Option B. Implement a single, large storage pool for all data to simplify management and ensure all data is readily accessible. Option C. Rely solely on the default TSM V7, one settings for storage pool management without further configuration or monitoring. Option D. Strategically define multiple storage pools, e.g., disk for active data, tape for archive, and configure data movement policies to migrate data based on access frequency and retention periods. The correct answer is B. Implement a single large storage pool for all data to simplify management and ensure all data is readily accessible. Explanation: the control framework reveals a common challenge in implementing IBM Tivoli Storage Manager (TSM) v7. 1. Balancing the need for efficient data retrieval with the operational costs and complexity of managing storage tiers. In this scenario, the challenge lies in optimizing the process of data archiving and retrieval across different storage media, e.g., disk, tape, to meet both performance requirements for active data and cost-effectiveness for long-term retention, all while adhering to the implicit regulatory expectation of data availability and integrity. Careful judgment is required to select the most appropriate TSM v7 features and configurations without compromising data accessibility or incurring excessive operational overhead. The correct approach involves leveraging TSM v7's tiered storage management capabilities, specifically through the strategic use of storage pools and data movement policies. By defining appropriate retention levels and movement schedules, administrators can ensure that frequently accessed data resides on faster, more expensive storage, like disk pools, while less frequently accessed data is migrated to slower, more cost-effective storage, like tape pools. This process optimization directly addresses the exam's focus on efficient implementation by ensuring that data is stored and retrieved from the most suitable tier based on its access frequency and retention requirements. This aligns with best professional practice by maximizing resource utilization, minimizing storage costs, and maintaining acceptable performance for data access, thereby supporting business continuity and compliance objectives. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on a single storage pool for all data, regardless of access frequency or retention needs. This fails to optimize the storage hierarchy, leading to higher costs as active data might be stored on expensive tiers unnecessarily, or slower retrieval times for infrequently accessed data if it's relegated to the slowest tier without proper management. This approach represents a regulatory and ethical failure because it can lead to inefficient resource allocation and potentially hinder timely data access, which could be critical for audits or disaster recovery, thereby jeopardizing data availability and integrity. Another incorrect approach would be to implement complex, ad hoc data movement rules without a clear understanding of data access patterns or retention policies. This can lead to data being moved to inappropriate tiers, increasing the risk of data loss or prolonged retrieval times. This is professionally unacceptable as it demonstrates a lack of systematic process optimization and can result in operational inefficiencies and potential compliance breaches due to unpredictable data accessibility. A further incorrect approach would be to ignore TSM v7's built-in reporting and monitoring tools for storage pool utilization and data movement. Without this oversight, administrators cannot effectively assess the performance of their storage tiering strategy or identify potential bottlenecks. This represents a failure in professional due diligence, as it prevents proactive problem-solving and optimization, potentially leading to performance degradation and increased operational risks. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the organization's data lifecycle management requirements, including data access patterns, retention policies, and budget constraints. This understanding should then be mapped to the capabilities of TSM v7. 1. Focusing on configuring storage pools, data movement rules, and retention policies in a manner that achieves the desired balance between performance, cost, and compliance. Regular monitoring and review of the implemented strategy are crucial to ensure ongoing optimization and to adapt to changing business needs. Question 11. The audit findings indicate that while the IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7 environment is meeting current backup and restore service level agreements, there are opportunities to enhance the efficiency of data management processes. Which of the following actions would best address these findings by focusing on process optimization within the TSM v7 implementation? Option A. Immediately allocate additional budget for upgrading the TSM server hardware and increasing network bandwidth to proactively prevent future performance issues. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of backup schedules storage pool configurations, and client backup settings to identify and implement performance tuning opportunities. Option C. Implement random configuration changes based on industry forums and peer recommendations to explore potential performance improvements. Option D. Continue current operational procedures, as the existing performance metrics demonstrate compliance with established service level agreements. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of backup schedules, storage pool configurations, and client backup settings to identify and implement performance tuning opportunities. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations where performance metrics, while seemingly adequate, mask underlying inefficiencies that could impact long-term system stability and resource utilization. The audits focus on process optimization with an IBM Tivoli Storage Manager, TSM, v7. One implementation highlights the need to move beyond basic functionality to proactive and efficient management. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing improvements that are not immediately obvious from standard operational reports, requiring a deeper understanding of TSM's internal workings and best practices. This requires a shift from reactive problem-solving to strategic enhancement, balancing immediate operational needs with future scalability and cost-effectiveness. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review of TSM backup and restore processes, focusing on identifying bottlenecks and areas for improvement. This includes analyzing backup schedules to optimize data staging and retrieval, evaluating storage pool configurations for efficient data placement and retrieval, and examining client-side backup configurations for potential performance gains. Furthermore, it necessitates a review of TSM server configuration parameters that directly influence performance, such as network settings, database optimization, and active/inactive data management. This approach aligns with the principles of process optimization by seeking to enhance efficiency, reduce resource consumption, and improve overall system responsiveness without compromising data integrity or availability. It represents best professional practice because it is data-driven, systematic, and aims for tangible improvements in operational efficiency, which indirectly supports regulatory compliance by ensuring reliable data protection and accessibility. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to solely focus on increasing hardware resources, such as adding more disk space or faster network interfaces, without first analyzing the existing TSM processes. This is a reactive and often costly solution that fails to address the root cause of potential inefficiency. It represents a failure to adhere to the spirit of process optimization, which prioritizes intelligent configuration and workflow adjustments over brute force hardware upgrades. Ethically, this could be seen as a wasteful expenditure of organizational resources. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the audit findings and continue with the current TSM configuration, assuming that current performance levels are acceptable. This demonstrates a lack of proactive management and a disregard for potential future issues. It fails to embrace the continuous improvement aspect of process optimization and could lead to performance degradation over time, potentially impacting service level agreements, SLAs, and data recovery capabilities. This approach could also be seen as a failure to meet professional responsibilities for maintaining optimal system performance. A third incorrect approach would be to implement changes based on anecdotal evidence or without a thorough understanding of TSM v7, one's specific functionalities and best practices. This could lead to unintended consequences, such as performance degradation, data corruption, or increased operational complexity. It lacks the systematic, analytical rigor required for effective process optimization and could violate professional standards of due diligence and competence. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such audit findings should adopt a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the scope and implications of the audit's process optimization requirement within the context of IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7. 1. Second, gather relevant performance data and logs from the TSM environment. Third, analyze this data to identify specific areas of inefficiency, such as long backup windows, high resource utilization during peak times, or suboptimal data retrieval times. Fourth, research and consult IBM's official documentation and best practices for TSM v7, one to understand recommended configurations and optimization techniques. Fifth, develop a prioritized plan for implementing changes, focusing on those that offer the greatest potential for improvement with the least risk. Finally, monitor the impact of implemented changes to validate their effectiveness and make further adjustments as needed. This iterative process ensures that optimization efforts are targeted, effective, and aligned with professional standards and organizational goals. Question 12. Regulatory review indicates that while process optimization for IBM Tivoli Storage Manager V7 one is encouraged to improve efficiency, it must be conducted within a framework that ensures data integrity, security, and auditability. Considering these constraints, which of the following approaches to optimizing TSM V7 one processes is most aligned with best professional practices and regulatory expectations? Option A. Disable incremental backups for less critical datasets to reduce backup windows and storage consumption, focusing optimization efforts on full backups only. Option B. Implement a phased approach to optimize TSM processes, starting with analyzing TSM's built-in reporting and monitoring data to identify specific areas for improvement, proposing targeted configuration adjustments, rigorously testing these adjustments in a non-production environment, and conducting a post-implementation review to validate effectiveness and ensure no adverse impacts on data integrity or security. Option C. Aggressively increase deduplication ratios across all storage pools to maximize storage space savings, assuming that this will inherently improve overall system performance and reduce operational costs. Option D. Apply configuration changes recommended in online technical forums and community discussions without prior testing or validation, based on the assumption that these are generally accepted best practices for TSM v7. 1. The correct answer is B. Implement a phased approach to optimize TSM processes, starting with analyzing TSM's built-in reporting and monitoring data to identify specific areas for improvement, proposing targeted configuration adjustments, rigorously testing these adjustments in a non-production environment, and conducting a post-implementation review to validate effectiveness and ensure no adverse impacts on data integrity or security. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing performance optimization with adherence to established regulatory frameworks and internal policies. The professional challenge lies in identifying and implementing process improvements for IBM Tivoli Storage Manager, TSM, v7, one without inadvertently violating data integrity, security, or auditability requirements mandated by the exam's implied regulatory context, which, for C2010-511, would typically align with general data protection and IT governance principles, often mirroring U.S. or international standards if not explicitly stated otherwise for a vendor-specific exam. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any optimization efforts are both effective and compliant. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, documented, and validated method for process optimization. This involves understanding the current state, identifying specific bottlenecks or inefficiencies, proposing targeted solutions, and rigorously testing those solutions in a controlled environment before full deployment. This methodical approach ensures that optimizations do not introduce unintended consequences, such as data corruption, security vulnerabilities, or performance degradation in other areas. It also aligns with IT governance best practices, which emphasize change management, risk assessment, and validation to maintain system stability and compliance. The focus on leveraging TSM's built-in reporting and monitoring tools, coupled with a phased implementation and post-implementation review, demonstrates a commitment to data integrity and operational excellence, which are often implicit regulatory expectations for data management systems. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on aggressive deduplication ratios without considering the impact on restore performance or data integrity would be professionally unacceptable. This is because it prioritizes a single metric over the holistic health of the storage management system and could lead to extended recovery times or even data loss if not carefully managed. Such an approach could violate regulatory requirements related to data availability and recoverability. Another incorrect approach, such as disabling incremental backups for certain datasets to reduce storage consumption, would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This directly compromises data backup integrity and could lead to the permanent loss of critical information, violating data retention and protection mandates. It also undermines the fundamental purpose of a storage management system. A third incorrect approach, which involves implementing configuration changes based on anecdotal evidence from online forums without proper testing or validation within the specific TSM environment, is also professionally unsound. This introduces a high degree of risk, as forum advice may not be applicable to the organization's unique setup or may be outdated. This lack of due diligence can lead to system instability, data corruption, and security breaches, all of which have regulatory implications. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach to problem-solving and change management. This includes 1. Clearly defining the problem or objective, e.g., improving TSM performance. 2. Gathering comprehensive data on the current state using TSM's monitoring and reporting capabilities. 3. Researching potential solutions, considering their impact on all aspects of TSM functionality, including backup, restore, security, and reporting. 4. Developing a detailed plan for implementing and testing proposed changes, including rollback procedures. 5. Obtaining necessary approvals through a formal change control process. 6. Executing the changes in a controlled manner, preferably during off-peak hours. 7. Thoroughly testing and validating the changes post-implementation. 8. Documenting all changes and their outcomes. This systematic process ensures that optimizations are effective, efficient, and compliant with all relevant regulations and policies. Question 13. Governance review demonstrates that the organization's primary data backup and recovery solution, IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7, 1, is scheduled for end of support in the near future. Business stakeholders are concerned about the cost and disruption of a migration, advocating for continued use of the current system with internal support. What is the most professionally responsible approach to address this situation, considering the need for data integrity, security, and regulatory compliance? Option A. Immediately implement the cheapest available alternative data protection solution, regardless of its long-term suitability or supportability, to minimize immediate expenditure. Option B. Delay any decision regarding migration until the end-of-support date is reached, then conduct an emergency procurement and implementation of a new solution. Option C. Continue using IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7. 1. Leveraging internal IT expertise to manage and patch the system, and deferring any migration until a critical issue arises. Option D. Initiate a phased migration plan to a supported, modern data protection solution well in advance of the end-of-support date, prioritizing a solution that meets current and future business and regulatory requirements. The correct answer is D. Initiate a phased migration plan to a supported, modern data protection solution well in advance of the end-of-support date, prioritizing a solution that meets current and future business and regulatory requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT governance, where a critical business function's data protection relies on a specific technology, IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7. 1. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term strategic implications of using a product that is nearing its end of support. Stakeholders, particularly those from the business units, may prioritize immediate cost savings and perceive stability over proactive risk mitigation, creating tension with IT and compliance departments. The professional challenge is to articulate the risks clearly and advocate for a solution that aligns with both business objectives and regulatory compliance without causing undue disruption or alarm. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive, risk-based strategy that prioritizes migrating to a supported solution before the end-of-support date. This aligns with best practices in IT asset management and data governance, which mandate the use of supported software to ensure security patches, bug fixes, and vendor support are available. From a regulatory perspective, especially concerning data protection and business continuity, operating on unsupported software introduces significant compliance risks. Failure to maintain a secure and recoverable data environment can lead to breaches, data loss, and non-compliance with data retention and availability mandates, potentially resulting in fines and reputational damage. This approach demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to maintaining a robust and compliant IT infrastructure. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to continue using the unsupported IBM Tivoli Storage Manager V7. 1. Indefinitely, relying on internal expertise to manage it. This is professionally unacceptable because it ignores the inherent security vulnerabilities and lack of vendor support associated with end-of-life software. It creates a significant compliance risk, as many data protection regulations implicitly or explicitly require the use of supported and secure systems. This approach also exposes the organization to operational risks, such as an inability to recover from data loss incidents due to unpatched vulnerabilities or lack of vendor assistance. Another incorrect approach is to delay the migration until the end-of-support date is imminent or has passed, then scramble for a solution. This reactive strategy is professionally unsound, as it often leads to rushed decisions, potentially suboptimal technology choices, and increased implementation costs due to urgency. It also significantly elevates the risk of a security incident or data loss occurring during the transition period when the system is unsupported. This approach fails to demonstrate proactive risk management and strategic planning, which are core professional responsibilities in IT governance. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize the cheapest available alternative without a thorough assessment of its suitability, scalability, and long-term supportability. While cost is a factor, it should not be the sole determinant. This approach risks selecting a solution that does not meet the organization's current or future data protection needs, potentially leading to further costly migrations or compliance issues down the line. It neglects the professional obligation to ensure that technology investments support business objectives and regulatory requirements effectively and sustainably. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive risk assessment. This involves identifying all potential risks associated with the current unsupported system, including security, operational, and compliance risks. Following this, a thorough evaluation of alternative solutions should be conducted, considering factors such as functionality, scalability, vendor reputation, long-term support, and total cost of ownership. Stakeholder engagement is crucial throughout this process to ensure buy-in and alignment with business priorities. A clear communication plan, outlining the risks and the proposed mitigation strategy, should be developed and presented to relevant stakeholders, emphasizing the benefits of a proactive approach in terms of risk reduction and long-term stability. Question 14. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a new critical business application is scheduled for deployment, and the business unit is requesting expedited implementation with minimal disruption to their existing workflows. The project manager must ensure that the IBM Tivoli Storage Manager V7 implementation for this application adheres to data protection policies and recovery objectives without significantly delaying the deployment timeline. Which of the following approaches best balances these competing demands while ensuring compliance? Option A. Proactively engage with the business unit and IT compliance teams to define specific RPO/RTO requirements for the application. Then design and implement a TSM V7 backup and recovery strategy that meets these defined objectives, integrating it into the deployment plan with minimal impact on the application's go-live date. Option B. Implement a standard, predefined TSM V7 backup policy for all new applications, assuming it will adequately cover the requirements of this critical business application. Option C. Prioritize the business unit's request for expedited deployment by bypassing a detailed review of TSM V7 configuration and data protection requirements, focusing solely on application functionality during the initial rollout. Option D. Proceed with the application deployment as requested by the business unit, deferring the detailed TSM V7 configuration and data protection strategy to a post-deployment phase to avoid any potential delays. The correct answer is A. Proactively engage with the business unit and IT compliance teams to define specific RPO/RTO requirements for the application, then design and implement a TSM V7 backup and recovery strategy that meets these defined objectives, integrating it into the deployment plan with minimal impact on the application's go-live date. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT implementation projects, balancing the immediate needs of business stakeholders with the long-term operational integrity and compliance requirements of the storage infrastructure. The project manager must navigate competing priorities, where a business unit might push for rapid deployment of a new application without fully considering the implications for data protection. Recovery point objectives (RPO) and recovery time objectives (RTO), as defined by IBM Tivoli Storage Manager (TSM) v7. 1. Best practices and relevant regulatory frameworks. The pressure to deliver quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise data security, auditability, and disaster recovery capabilities, creating significant risk. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and collaborative engagement with all relevant stakeholders, including the business unit, IT security, compliance officers, and the TSM administration team. This approach prioritizes a thorough understanding of the application's data characteristics, criticality, and the business's RPO/RTO requirements. It then translates these requirements into specific TSM v7. 1. Configuration settings, such as appropriate backup schedules, retention policies, data deduplication strategies, and disaster recovery plans. This ensures that the implementation aligns with both business objectives and regulatory mandates for data protection and availability. Adhering to the IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7. 1. Implementation guidelines and any applicable data protection regulations, e.g., those governing financial data, healthcare records, or personal information, is paramount. This method fosters transparency, manages expectations, and builds confidence by demonstrating a commitment to robust data management practices. Incorrect approaches analysis. 1. Incorrect approach involves prioritizing the business unit's immediate request for deployment without a comprehensive review of data protection requirements. This failure to integrate TSM v7. 1. Best practices and regulatory considerations from the outset can lead to inadequate backup coverage, longer recovery times than acceptable, and potential non-compliance with data retention laws. This approach neglects the fundamental responsibility of safeguarding data and ensuring business continuity. Another incorrect approach is to implement a generic, one-size-fits-all TSM v7, one configuration for the new application, assuming it will meet all needs. This overlooks the unique data characteristics and criticality of different applications. Such an approach risks either over-provisioning resources, leading to inefficiency, or under-provisioning, leading to data loss or extended downtime, both of which are professionally unacceptable and potentially non-compliant with service-level agreements and regulatory mandates. A third incorrect approach is to defer the detailed TSM v7, one configuration and data protection strategy to a later phase, focusing solely on application functionality during initial deployment. This creates a significant technical debt and increases the risk of data loss or corruption before proper safeguards are in place. It also makes it harder to retroactively apply necessary configurations and policies, potentially requiring disruptive changes. This approach demonstrates a lack of foresight and a failure to adhere to the principle of embedding security and data protection throughout the project lifecycle. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, starting with identifying and assessing potential threats and vulnerabilities related to data storage and recovery for the new application. This involves understanding the application's data lifecycle, its business criticality, and any specific regulatory requirements for data retention, privacy, and availability. The next step is to engage all relevant stakeholders to define clear RPO and RTO targets. Based on these requirements, the project manager, in collaboration with TSM administrators and security personnel, should design and implement a TSM v7, one solution that meets these objectives while adhering to IBM's best practices and applicable regulations. Regular review and testing of backup and recovery processes are crucial to ensure ongoing effectiveness and compliance. Question 15. Implementation of a critical data recovery solution for a high-priority business unit is urgently required due to a potential data loss event. The storage team has identified a method to expedite data retrieval and backup, but this approach temporarily deviates from the established data retention policy managed by the compliance team. What is the most professional and compliant approach to address this situation? Option A. Permanently adjust the data retention policy to accommodate the expedited recovery method without formal review or approval from the compliance team. Option B. Immediately implement the expedited data recovery and backup solution to prevent data loss and inform the compliance team of the policy deviation after the fact. Option C. Refuse to implement any solution that deviates from the current retention policy, advising the business unit to wait until a compliant process can be established. Option D. Collaborate with the compliance team to define and document a temporary exception to the retention policy for the affected data, outlining the duration and remediation steps, and proceed with the expedited solution. The correct answer is D. Collaborate with the compliance team to define and document a temporary exception to the retention policy for the affected data, outlining the duration and remediation steps, and proceed with the expedited solution. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT project management, balancing the immediate needs of a critical business unit with the long-term strategic goals and resource constraints of the organization. The storage team is under pressure to deliver a solution quickly to mitigate data loss risk, while the compliance team is concerned about adhering to established data retention policies and audit trails. The professional challenge lies in navigating these competing priorities without compromising data integrity, regulatory compliance, or the overall stability of the Tivoli Storage Manager (TSM) environment. A hasty decision could lead to significant data loss, audit failures, or operational issues down the line. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a collaborative effort between the storage and compliance teams to define a temporary, documented exception to the standard retention policy. This approach represents best professional practice because it acknowledges the urgency of the business unit's request, while ensuring that deviations from policy are controlled and auditable. It prioritizes data protection by seeking a solution that meets immediate needs without permanently undermining compliance. This aligns with the principles of responsible data management, where exceptions are managed through a formal process, ensuring that all actions are traceable and justifiable. The temporary nature of the exception, coupled with a plan for remediation, demonstrates foresight and adherence to good governance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a solution without consulting the compliance team and documenting the deviation is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses established governance processes, creating an unmanaged risk. This could lead to audit findings, fines, and reputational damage if the data is later found to be improperly handled or inaccessible for legal discovery. Ignoring the business unit's urgent request and insisting on full compliance with existing policies without exploring any temporary accommodations is also professionally problematic. While adherence to policy is crucial, a rigid stance can lead to business disruption and potential data loss, which can have severe financial and operational consequences. It fails to demonstrate a proactive and problem-solving approach to stakeholder needs. Implementing a permanent change to the retention policy without a thorough impact assessment and formal approval process is a failure of due diligence. This could inadvertently create new compliance gaps or introduce unforeseen operational complexities into the TSM environment, impacting long-term data management strategy and potentially violating other regulatory requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a dilemma should first engage in active listening to fully understand the business unit's critical need and the associated risks. Simultaneously, they must consult with the compliance team to understand the regulatory implications of any proposed solution. The decision-making process should involve 1. Risk assessment. Quantify the risks associated with both immediate action and inaction. 2. Policy review. Understand the existing policies and identify potential areas for temporary flexibility. 3. Collaborative solutioning. Work with all stakeholders to devise a solution that mitigates immediate risk while adhering to compliance principles as closely as possible. 4. Documentation. Rigorously document all decisions, justifications, and any temporary exceptions granted, including the rationale and remediation plans. 5. Remediation planning. Establish a clear plan to bring the environment back into full compliance once the immediate crisis has passed. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with both business objectives and regulatory obligations. Question 16. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a less feature-rich, lower-cost storage tier for archival data could yield significant immediate savings, but a thorough review of the IBM Tivoli Storage Manager V7, implementation guidelines and relevant data protection regulations indicates potential challenges in meeting long-term auditability and immutability requirements for certain sensitive data types. Which approach best balances financial considerations with regulatory compliance? Option A. Prioritize the lower-cost storage tier, assuming that future regulatory changes or available patches will address any compliance gaps, and document the potential risks for management review. Option B. Defer the decision on storage tiering until after the initial implementation of TSM v7. 1. Focusing on core backup and recovery functionality, and address compliance requirements as they become more pressing. Option C. Implement the lower-cost storage tier and rely on manual processes and separate tools to ensure auditability and immutability for the sensitive data, accepting the increased operational overhead and potential for human error. Option D. Conduct a detailed risk assessment to identify specific data types and their associated regulatory retention and immutability mandates, then design the TSM v7. One solution to meet these requirements, even if it necessitates a higher initial investment in appropriate storage tiers and configurations. The correct answer is A. Prioritize the lower-cost storage tier, assuming that future regulatory changes or available patches will address any compliance gaps, and document the potential risks for management review. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT implementation projects where the perceived immediate cost savings of a less compliant solution are weighed against the long-term risks and potential regulatory penalties. The challenge lies in balancing the desire for efficiency and cost reduction with the absolute necessity of adhering to data protection and retention regulations. The project manager must navigate stakeholder pressure, particularly from finance, who may prioritize short-term financial gains, while ensuring the technical solution meets all legal and compliance mandates. The complexity is amplified by the potential for data breaches, reputational damage, and significant fines if compliance is not rigorously maintained. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a comprehensive understanding and strict adherence to the IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7. 1. Implementation guidelines and any relevant data governance regulations applicable to the organization's jurisdiction. This involves ensuring that the chosen storage solution, including its configuration and operational procedures, fully supports the organization's data retention policies, audit trails, and data security requirements as mandated by law. Best professional practice dictates that compliance is not an optional add-on, but a foundational requirement. This approach safeguards the organization from legal repercussions, maintains customer trust, and ensures business continuity by preventing data loss or unauthorized access, all of which are critical in a regulated environment. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that focuses solely on minimizing upfront infrastructure costs without a thorough assessment of compliance implications is professionally unacceptable. This failure to integrate regulatory requirements into the initial design phase can lead to significant downstream costs associated with remediation, fines, and potential legal action. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the organization's legal obligations. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that standard TSM configurations will automatically meet all regulatory needs without specific validation. This oversimplification ignores the nuances of different data types, retention periods, and jurisdictional requirements. It can result in non-compliance, data integrity issues, and an inability to produce data for audits or legal discovery, thereby exposing the organization to severe penalties. Finally, an approach that defers compliance considerations to a later stage of the project or relies on manual workarounds is also professionally unsound. This reactive strategy increases the risk of overlooking critical compliance elements, making remediation more difficult and expensive. It signals a failure to proactively manage risk and a lack of commitment to a robust and compliant data management strategy. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, integrating compliance requirements from the outset of any IT implementation. This involves a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory landscape, the organization's specific data governance policies, and the capabilities of the chosen technology. Stakeholder engagement is crucial, ensuring that all parties understand the implications of noncompliance. A structured process of requirements gathering, solution design, implementation, and ongoing monitoring, with a constant focus on regulatory adherence, is essential for making sound professional decisions. Question 17. System analysis indicates that a critical business unit requires immediate access to historical data stored within IBM Tivoli Storage Manager V7, one for an urgent regulatory audit. They are requesting a direct, unfiltered export of all relevant data, bypassing standard TSM V7, one data retrieval procedures to expedite the process. The IT department is concerned that this request, if fulfilled as stated, could compromise data security and audit trails, which approach best balances the business unit's urgent need with the organization's data protection and TSM V7. 1. Implementation integrity. Option A. Grant the business unit direct read-only access to the TSM V7, one storage pool containing the historical data, allowing them to extract information as needed. Option B. Create a separate temporary TSM V7, one instance specifically for this audit, populated with the requested historical data, and provide the business unit with administrative access to this instance. Option C. Collaborate with the business unit to define the precise data sets required for the audit and utilize TSM V7, one's granular reporting and export functionalities, ensuring all access and retrieval actions are logged and compliant with organizational policies. Option D. Advise the business unit that their request cannot be fulfilled due to security risks and instruct them to wait for the standard data retrieval process, which may take several days. The correct answer is C. Collaborate with the business unit to define the precise data sets required for the audit and utilize TSM V7, one's granular reporting and export functionalities, ensuring all access and retrieval actions are logged and compliant with organizational policies. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT implementation projects, balancing the immediate needs of a critical business unit with the broader, long-term strategic goals of the organization, particularly concerning data protection and compliance. The challenge lies in the inherent tension between a department's desire for rapid, potentially less secure access to data, and the IT department's responsibility to maintain a robust, compliant, and secure storage infrastructure, as mandated by IBM Tivoli Storage Manager, TSM, V7. 1. Implementation best practices and any applicable regulatory frameworks. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to established TSM V7, 1. Implementation guidelines and the organization's data governance policies. This involves a thorough assessment of the business unit's requirements against the capabilities and security features of TSM V7. 1. Ensuring that any solution implemented is both effective for the user and compliant with data retention, access control, and disaster recovery mandates. This aligns with the professional responsibility to implement solutions that are not only functional, but also secure, auditable, and sustainable, thereby mitigating risks of data breaches, non-compliance, and operational inefficiencies. An incorrect approach would be to bypass standard TSM V7, one configuration and security protocols to meet the immediate demand. This could involve granting broad access privileges without proper authorization, circumventing data deduplication or encryption features, or failing to integrate the new storage needs into the overall TSM backup and archive strategy. Such actions would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Specifically, it could lead to violations of data privacy regulations, if applicable to the jurisdiction, compromise the integrity and confidentiality of sensitive data, create auditability gaps, and ultimately increase the organization's exposure to security threats and potential legal repercussions. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the established framework designed to protect organizational assets and ensure compliance. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of project scope, stakeholder requirements, and existing technical and regulatory constraints. This involves engaging in open communication with all stakeholders, conducting a comprehensive risk assessment, and evaluating potential solutions against established best practices and compliance requirements. When faced with conflicting demands, the professional approach is to seek a balanced solution that addresses immediate needs without compromising long-term security, compliance, and operational integrity, escalating to management if necessary to resolve impasses. Question 18. Quality control measures reveal that the current Tivoli Storage Manager V7, 1 implementation is struggling to meet the recovery time objectives, RTO, for a critical financial reporting application due to insufficient storage capacity and processing power. The IT operations team has identified a need for immediate upgrades, but the IT leadership is hesitant due to budget constraints and is pushing for a complete re-architecture of the storage environment over the next 18 months. The business unit responsible for the financial reporting application is concerned about potential data loss and extended downtime during month-end closing. Which approach best balances the immediate critical need with the long-term strategic vision, while adhering to professional IT governance principles? Option A. Defer any immediate upgrades and focus all resources on the complete re-architecture of the storage environment, as this will provide a more robust and scalable solution in the long run. Option B. Implement the necessary immediate upgrades to storage capacity and processing power for the financial reporting application to meet its RTO, while simultaneously initiating a project to define the requirements and architecture for the 18-month re-architecture plan, ensuring clear communication with all stakeholders about the phased approach and its benefits. Option C. Prioritize the re-architecture project and implement a temporary, less robust solution for the financial reporting application that might not fully meet its RTO, but will suffice until the new architecture is in place. Option D. Proceed with the immediate upgrades to storage capacity and processing power for the financial reporting application without involving IT leadership in the decision-making process to ensure the critical business need is met promptly. The correct answer is B. Implement the necessary immediate upgrades to storage capacity and processing power for the financial reporting application to meet its RTO, while simultaneously initiating a project to define the requirements and architecture for the 18-month re-architecture plan, ensuring clear communication with all stakeholders about the phased approach and its benefits. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT implementation projects, balancing the immediate needs of a critical business function with the long-term strategic goals and resource constraints of the organization. The stakeholder perspective is crucial because different departments have varying priorities and understandings of the Tivoli Storage Manager, TSM, V7, one system's capabilities and limitations. The challenge lies in aligning these diverse perspectives to ensure a successful implementation that meets both immediate operational demands and future scalability requirements, while adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing data management and storage within the relevant jurisdiction, which for this exam is assumed to be US-based, focusing on general IT best practices and compliance principles applicable in a US context, without specific named regulations unless implied by the exam scope. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, collaborative process that prioritizes understanding and addressing the immediate critical business need for data recovery, while simultaneously planning for future growth and integration. This means engaging with the affected business unit to fully grasp their recovery point objectives, RPO, and recovery time objectives, RTO, and then designing a TSM V7, one configuration that can meet these immediate needs. Crucially, this approach also mandates proactive engagement with IT leadership and other stakeholders to communicate the need for future resource allocation, storage, processing power, network bandwidth, to support anticipated data growth and evolving business requirements. This demonstrates best professional practice by ensuring operational continuity, fostering stakeholder buy-in, and laying the groundwork for a sustainable and scalable storage solution. It aligns with general IT governance principles that emphasize risk management, business alignment, and strategic planning. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely focus on the immediate recovery needs without considering future scalability. This would lead to a short-sighted solution that might fail to accommodate data growth, potentially causing performance degradation, increased costs due to emergency upgrades, and failure to meet future RPOs/RTOs. This represents a failure in strategic planning and risk management, potentially violating implicit compliance requirements for data availability and integrity over time. Another incorrect approach is to defer the immediate critical recovery need in favor of a more comprehensive, long-term design that is not yet fully defined or approved. This risks significant business disruption and potential data loss if the critical recovery scenario occurs before the ideal solution is implemented. This approach demonstrates a disregard for immediate business continuity and a failure to prioritize critical operational requirements, which is a significant ethical and professional lapse in IT service delivery. A third incorrect approach is to implement a solution that meets immediate needs, but is technically complex and difficult to manage, without adequate training or documentation for the operations team. This increases the risk of operational errors, security vulnerabilities, and extended downtime during recovery operations. This reflects poor project management and a failure to consider the operational impact of the implementation, potentially leading to non-compliance with operational security and availability standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a phased approach to TSM V7. One implementation, starting with a thorough assessment of current critical business needs and regulatory compliance requirements. This should be followed by a design that addresses these immediate needs while incorporating a roadmap for future growth and integration. Continuous stakeholder engagement, clear communication of technical requirements and resource needs, and a focus on operational readiness are paramount. Decision-making should be guided by a risk-based methodology, prioritizing solutions that ensure business continuity, data integrity, and compliance, while also considering long-term cost-effectiveness and maintainability. Question 19. Investigation of a critical audit request requires the retrieval of specific data as it existed on a particular date from an IBM Tivoli Storage Manager V7. 1. Environment. The audit team needs to verify historical system configurations and user activity logs from that exact point in time. The TSM V7. One server contains multiple storage pools and retention policies, and the data volume is substantial. The IT team is concerned about the potential impact of a large-scale restore operation on ongoing production services. Which approach best addresses the audit's requirements while adhering to professional data management practices within the TSM V7? 1. Framework. Option A. Inform the audit team that retrieving data from a specific historical point in time is operationally too complex and propose to provide them with the most recent available data instead. Option B. Initiate a point-in-time restore operation using TSM V7. 1's granular restore capabilities, targeting the specific data required for the audit. After the restore, conduct thorough validation of the retrieved data in an isolated test environment before presenting it to the audit team. Option C. Perform a full system backup from the closest available date to the requested audit date and restore it to a separate non-production server, then manually extract the required audit information. Option D. Immediately restore the entire TSM V7. 1 database and all associated client data from the requested date to a new production server, overriding existing data to ensure a clean slate for audit verification. The correct answer is B. Initiate a point-in-time restore operation using TSM V7. 1's granular restore capabilities, targeting the specific data required for the audit. After the restore, conduct thorough validation of the retrieved data in an isolated test environment before presenting it to the audit team. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical nature of data integrity and the potential for regulatory noncompliance if data is not managed according to established policies and IBM Tivoli Storage Manager, TSM, V7. 1 Best practices. The core issue revolves around balancing operational efficiency with the imperative to maintain accurate and accessible historical data, which is a fundamental requirement for many compliance frameworks. The need to restore a large volume of data from a specific point in time, while also ensuring ongoing operations are not unduly impacted, requires a strategic decision-making process that prioritizes data recovery and adherence to TSM V7. 1. Operational guidelines. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the immediate need for data restoration, while adhering to the principles of data management and recovery as implemented within IBM Tivoli Storage Manager V7. 1. This involves leveraging TSM's capabilities for point-in-time restores, which are designed to retrieve data as it existed at a specific moment, thereby fulfilling the audit requirement. Furthermore, it emphasizes thorough testing and validation of the restored data to ensure its integrity and usability, a crucial step in any data recovery operation. This aligns with the implicit regulatory expectation of having reliable data available for audits and investigations. An incorrect approach that prioritizes a quick, but potentially incomplete, restore without proper validation fails to meet the audit's requirements for data accuracy and completeness. This could lead to regulatory penalties for non-compliance, as the restored data might not accurately reflect the state of the system at the requested time. Another incorrect approach that involves restoring to a production environment without adequate isolation or testing risks data corruption or overriding, jeopardizing ongoing operations, and potentially creating further data integrity issues. This also violates the principle of controlled and predictable system changes, which is a cornerstone of IT governance and compliance. A third incorrect approach that involves discarding older data to simplify the restore process is a direct violation of data retention policies and audit requirements, leading to severe compliance breaches and potential legal ramifications. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the request's objectives, e.g., audit compliance, data integrity. This should be followed by an assessment of available tools and their capabilities within the TSM v7.1 environment, considering the impact on current operations. Prioritizing data integrity and compliance requirements over expediency is paramount. The process should involve consulting TSM v7.1 documentation and best practices for restore operations, and if necessary, seeking expert advice. Finally, all actions taken should be meticulously documented to provide an audit trail. Question 20. What factors determine the appropriate configuration of data retention policies within IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7? 1. To ensure compliance with regulatory mandates and business continuity objectives. Option A. A general understanding of data lifecycle management principles without specific reference to the organization's unique regulatory obligations or TSM v7.1 features. Option B. The perceived cost-effectiveness of storage, prioritizing the shortest possible retention periods to minimize ongoing expenses. Option C. A comprehensive analysis of all applicable legal, industry, and internal data retention requirements, cross-referenced with the specific capabilities and limitations of IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7.1 for policy enforcement. Option D. The recommendations of the storage hardware vendor regarding data lifespan, irrespective of specific data types or regulatory mandates. The correct answer is C. A comprehensive analysis of all applicable legal, industry, and internal data retention requirements, cross-referenced with the specific capabilities and limitations of IBM Tivoli Storage Manager v7.1 for policy enforcement. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing data protection requirements with the operational needs of a business, specifically concerning the implementation of IBM Tivoli Storage Manager, TSM v7.1. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that data retention policies, which are often dictated by regulatory compliance and business continuity objectives, are accurately translated into TSM configurations. Misinterpreting or inadequately configuring these policies can lead to either non-compliance with legal mandates, e.g., data must be retained for a specific period, or operational inefficiencies, e.g., retaining data for too long, incurring unnecessary storage costs and complicating disaster recovery. The need for careful judgment arises from the technical complexity of TSM and the potential for significant financial and legal repercussions if data management is not handled correctly. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the specific regulatory framework applicable to the organization's data and the business's data retention requirements. This means meticulously reviewing all relevant laws, industry standards, and internal policies that dictate how long different types of data must be preserved. This understanding then informs the configuration of TSM retention policies, ensuring that they align precisely with these requirements. This approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the legal and business imperatives for data retention, minimizing the risk of non-compliance and optimizing storage resource utilization. It demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to responsible data stewardship, which are critical in IT implementation projects. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize solely on cost savings by setting overly aggressive data deletion schedules without verifying compliance. This fails to meet regulatory obligations, potentially leading to fines, legal action, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to configure retention policies based on assumptions or incomplete information about regulatory requirements. This also risks non-compliance and can result in the premature deletion of critical data or the unnecessary retention of data beyond its legal or business value. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the configuration of retention policies to individuals without sufficient understanding of both TSM's capabilities and the underlying regulatory landscape, leading to misconfigurations and potential compliance gaps. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive assessment of all applicable regulatory and business requirements. This should be followed by a detailed review of the TSM V7, documentation and best practices for configuring retention policies. Collaboration with legal counsel, compliance officers, and business stakeholders is essential to validate the understanding of requirements and the proposed configuration. Finally, a robust testing and validation process should be implemented to confirm that the TSM retention policies function as intended and meet all compliance obligations before full deployment.